Xenogears, the first major entry of Xenogames by Monolith Soft all the way back in 1998 for the PlayStation. What an entry it is, with fantastic music, a lot of ideas and small features that I feel hold up really well as someone experiencing the game for the first time decades later. Hey everyone, it's Yggdrasiel, and today it is my pleasure to share my opening thoughts with Xenogears as I finally have the luxury and time to experience this game through the power of things that shall not be named, for the sake of accessibility as well as for some quality of life. My goal with this video and future follow-ups is to try and weigh in on what I feel is happening, any certain feelings going down with the characters or premise, and to update you all on my overall progress. Naturally, this video will contain story spoilers, especially as we progress, so viewer discretion is being advised if you have any plans to experience this game for yourself. I also ask those of you who have played Xenogears to kindly not spoil or allude to anything. My mantra is, if it hasn't happened in the game yet for me, it hasn't happened, period. Now, before we begin, if you enjoy this video, please feel free to leave it a like, let me know what you think down below in the comments, and subscribe for more Monolith Soft RPG and general gaming content. There will be more updates like this one as I have the chance to progress through the game, and I really do enjoy getting to discuss my passion for these games with you all. Now, with all that out of the way, let's get stuck in. Let's talk a little bit of technicality then. What do I mean by playing the game with some quality of life? Well, I am playing with the most modern version of Perfect Works installed with the help of my good friend Nishquick Pops. In fact, I'm going to leave his guide in the description down below if you feel like giving this game a shot. With that said, I've checked off a few things, namely having the encounter rate and doubling the XP and drops in exchange. Some of the dialogue's also been adjusted to flow more smoothly, and there's some minor regional changes, like with the, say, town of Bledavik being adjusted to Bledavik. Many of the unique characters have also completely new gorgeous artwork by Lin on X, formerly known as Twitter, and also on Blue Sky, so massive props. I unfortunately did not do a proper patch-up job, so a handful of the older official art is present, but it's really not all that big a problem for me to warrant going back and trying to patch everything up. The other big option I patched in was overall game rebalancing, so that some notorious encounters towards the beginning of the game are not as rough to approach, while late game will still have some teeth to it. But now let's get into the game itself, and honestly, what an interesting way it begins. Nishquick told me that there's definitely a sense of Star Wars influence over much of the game, and I feel that right away with this large ship being hacked, ultimately forcing the captain to detonate the cruiser as the words "Ye shall be as gods" blares over the screens. And it's something that already is very prominent throughout much of the start of the game, this cryptic feeling of needing to ascend to godhood, slaying God, being God, etc., that we're going to go back to over and over again in these early stages even. But then we begin with our amnesiac protagonist, Fei Fong Wong, who doesn't remember anything before being dropped in the town of Lahan, and honestly, he is a bit difficult to get a sense of what he's really like. Prior to the events in Lahan, you have the option in dialogue to show that he could swap between being by-the-book character or being a bit mischievous, doing what he wants when he feels like when it's not appropriate. In fact, for the length of time that I've played the game so far, I'd come to call him a chaotic neutral character. A lot of initial events that Fei goes through aren't of his own accord, and it results in him either reluctantly following along with them or pushing through while lashing out and projecting his frustrations out on others. He's certainly not what I was expecting, and I'm eager to see how things unfold with him, considering the amount of responsibility being forced onto his shoulders. Perhaps the first thing that intrigued me then after starting to play was the music box in Dr. Satan's house, and this is where I do have to put the disclaimer that, as I've experienced the Xenoblade series before Xenogears, I'm gonna be alluding to events, themes, or parallels made between those games, and oh my goodness did the music box remind me of Shulk and Fiora's theme. With Lahan being destroyed, which I unfortunately already knew about because I did try to attempt to play this game years and years ago, I've heard that this game is one of the main reasons behind the charming starter town being attacked trope, but nonetheless, what a way to immediately shatter Fei's sense of fragile peace and just have him be on edge for the next several hours of the game. Getting to the forest area then and meeting Ellie is where I finally got that first sense of Xenoblade 3 is the retelling of Xenogears, with Faye and Ellie's encounter and dialogue immediately syncing up with Noah and Mio. I also find it odd that Faye remembers Ellie's name from the events before he was taken to Lahan, and just chooses not to question or peer into it. For all the angst that Faye is in, at least at that time he felt like a kind of character that if he felt something was off, he'd at least look into it, but alas, I guess not in this instance. Speaking of instances, there's also the first instance of Faye projecting his frustration and anger out onto others, and this becomes almost trope-like for him in his first interactions with people that he meets, at least initially till he starts to try and make some choices for himself down the line. I do like that each of the characters he lashes out at least offer different counterpoints. Oh, no one made you go in the gear, or the attack was going to happen regardless, you did what you thought was best, etc., etc. It sets up an initial moral conundrum that Faye has to reflect on frequently, but that's not the only conundrums our poor Faye is going to be dealing with. As the fourth segment progressed, Citan and the Weltall, which is the gear Faye took over in trying to save Lahan, comes back into the fold, and they both came back in much more quickly than I had expected. It was my idea that we would be using the gears much later on in the game, and Citan would be taking a while to catch up. But I feel like that could have been my Xenoblade X and Dunban head talking, which, this is what I feel Citan is. Although there is a sense of there is much more going on with Citan than simply he's the Dunban-esque protege trying to guide Faye and then promising he'll catch up on later. I will say I can see the very bare bones of Xenoblade X's scale philosophy very quickly when we're talking with the Weltall and the gears customization and fuel, but I'm straying a bit off topic. Citan and Ellie's talk while Faye is dozing off really reminded me of Pyra and Gramps talking while Rex was asleep in Xenoblade 2. It lets you know that Citan and Ellie clearly know each other prior to the starting events of the game, throwing more suspicion onto who Citan really is, a suspicion that only grows further and further as we meet more and more people who also recognize this Citan character, this Hyuga character, more than simply just as being a village doctor. As for Ellie, I really enjoy that she's more headstrong than I thought and very open with speaking her mind. I'm interested to see what will be her turning points throughout the game. From the forest, we go to Dazzle after Ellie leaves of her own accord, and the Tatooine Star vibes are once again on full air here with the machine part marketeering and large pirate ships scouring the deserts. Trekking through the desert after was actually simpler than I had expected, but what I did not expect was the formal introduction of one particular seeker of power, though we did see Graf sneakily in the attack on Lahan, though he did not introduce himself at that time. Funnily enough, he confronted Faye after Faye was like, "Oh, I don't need such power," to Citan. And I'm going to quickly bring up how I feel about the pacing or purposefulness of some of the choices that the game is choosing to make. For one, I'm really content with the pace of this game, and in fact, I don't feel like there's any sort of filler whatsoever. There's a tiny skim of fat to set up the narrative, and then it goes straight into the meat with each instance. And most of these smaller chapter segments flow into one another really well. They're also not shy with removing Faye from others and showing the events and dialogues of other cast members, most prominently right now with Citan. It almost feels as if there's a game of four-dimensional chess going on at all times with all of these pieces, and Faye is just reluctantly stuck with having to watch the pieces move around him. And as of right now, he himself doesn't have much choice. Maybe he can go in one direction, one or two moves, but ultimately he's reluctantly stuck with having to watch everything go around. He doesn't have any real say in what's ultimately unfolding just yet. Graf, however, seems to disagree and sees the potential that Faye possesses and alludes to knowing more about Faye than he himself can recognize. And he's not alone either, as it's very apparent Citan and Ellie know more as well. Alas, we succeed against Graf's test, but the noise ultimately draws the military, we're taken hostage, and then I think this right here is where the game really begins to ground itself. In fact, I would argue that everything prior to encountering our charismatic pirate prince Bartholomew Fatma is almost like a prologue that sets up the world and the basis of this initial cast. I really do enjoy Bart, and I see why he has a lot of appeal. That rowdy nature that belies a more thoughtful and calculating inner dialogue, and a sense of humor and purpose is just what our group needs, especially as Faye is just someone who continues to brood and brood. The stalactite cave, I feel, is mostly just there to let Faye and Bart begin to introduce each other to how they operate, and it ends with some premonitions on what power Weltall and Faye possess, this so-called Slayer of God, both through a meeting with the enigmatic researcher, as well as through physically displaying sudden spikes in power through the fight with the Calamity. All the while, we now know that through side conversations going on, Satan is just an alias for the man whose real name is Hyuga, and he knows Sigurd, who is Bart's right-hand man as well. This raises more questions like, if Sigurd and Satan know each other, are Sigurd and Ellie also acquainted? Are they all from Gebra and are dissenters? Do they feel a need to shepherd people and events going on between Ave and Kislev? I use the term shepherd a bit on the nose because to the people of Solaris, they see and call the surface dwellers lambs. Such is their inferiority that they need guidance. It's clear to see that people like Satan, Sigurd, and to some extent Ellie see things a bit differently, but we're barely given any crumb right now, aside from disclosing that, yet again, Satan still does not want to show his hand as to who he really is. Bart's earnest recruitments to Faye, and Faye seeing that by doing nothing, terrible things are still gonna happen anyway, it finally breaks a little bit of the shackles of doubt of inner turmoil that Faye has been experiencing. And for the first time, Faye makes his own conscious choice to progress. In this case, it's by helping Prince Bart with recovering Margie, Bart's younger cousin, who is regarded as this holy icon to many people, and she alone knows the location of one half of the Fatima Jasper, a relic that supposedly is going to hold a treasure or something like this that can change the tides of the inner turmoil presiding over Ave. Also, I've not mentioned it yet, but Bart's pride and joy sand ship is named the Yggdrasiel. Haha, look at me. I'm me own ship, and far easier to navigate than any Xenosaga 1 ship, I'll say that much. But to Bledavik we go, the capital. Off we go, where we find out that a martial arts tournament is being held in the middle of a festival, and we're going to use the merriment and entertainment to our advantage, having Faye enter the tournament while Bart sneaks in from the waterways to rescue Margie. Good lord, did I love this whole segment. It's probably my favorite of the game so far, except for swimming upstream. Oh my god, that was painful. But Bledavik is alive, it's boisterous, there's things going on everywhere, NPCs moving about, great music, and the choice to have the tournament and Bart's rescue play out simultaneously was the cherry on top. There's also really cool technical decisions, like based on what part of the tournament you're on, Bart is going to have to deal with different amounts of guards patrolling the castle, and there's additional conversations you can listen in on. I just find this as a really cool element of design. It's very unfortunate then that I ended up treating this like a very poor quality Hitman run, and just ended up slaying all the guards I came across, but I digress. I met up with Margie and rescued her, and there's one really cool detail I noticed in that room, in her room, where there's a cross identical to one that keeps appearing and flashing in flashbacks that Faye and Ellie have had. And it makes me feel that if we can talk to and see more about what Margie has to say or what her role is going to be in this game, we'll come to see a bit more light shine in on what this cross symbolizes. Before moving on to the confrontation with Ramses and Maya, or Mia, or Myong as I think she's called, let's circle back to the tournament side of things where we fight some random encounters. I do like the combatants. I love Joe. I met him in Dazzle, and his gag fight in the tournament was awesome. But then we also fight Dan, who's the younger brother of Alice, who unfortunately died alongside her fiancé and many other people in Lahan. It was also hinted at that Faye and Alice liked each other, but because of the customs of Lahan, Alice couldn't marry Faye as he's an outsider, but they remained close, and Faye was also close to Dan. But Dan, despite his moderately receding hairline, is young and rash, and can't let go of his anger towards Faye for escalating what happened in Lahan by getting in the Weltall. I almost thought Dan was a shade or a figment of Faye's imagination, but nope, he's actually there, and he can Kamehameha and grapple with a guy twice his height. So you know what, props to Dan. I will say I actually at this point did go back to an earlier save and redo the tournament, because the first time I fought against Dan, I did hit him, but I was like, you know, I wonder what happens if I choose not to engage against him in the encounter. And I was surprised to see that there indeed was a little bit of a change that can happen. You get rewarded with Alice's wedding dress. Dan gives you the wedding dress that she was supposed to wear as a stark reminder that she's gone and all of the future that she was robbed of. At least that's how it's supposed to feel. I mean, for me, it just felt a little funny. I imagined Faye being all sad and putting on the dress himself, which you can do. You can equip. It is equipable by anyone, even the male members of your team. So, yeah. And then there's the encounter with the wise man, who I can't remember at what point, but I'm fairly sure he was in a cutscene earlier with Graf. There's what looked like a strand of red hair going on the inside of his cloak. That's the giveaway for me if that's the case. He just comes along to see Faye fight, and it's like, well, your body's matured to where it needs to be, and just taunts Faye on repeat until something happens. His body sort of gives out, like it's on some sort of immunity timer. Almost like a faced Mechon in Xenoblade 1, or I guess for this game more accurately, a Mobius leader that's running out of life energy and needs to retreat. There's also a thought in my head with the choice of calling him the Wise Man and with Takahashi's penchant for biblical references. Is he one of 3 wise men? Is Graf one of them? And is there another character representing the 3rd wise man? I guess I'll just need to see what happens. As for the Ramses and Mia fight, that actually ended up being my first tough fight. I picked up on the mechanic going on easily enough where you're not supposed to attack him. Unfortunately, I still tried to fiddle around with it, causing Bart to fall on the floor, and I didn't have any revives. Oopsie, but I still went through with it. We escape, we meet up with Ellie one more time, and we all somehow managed to escape. Ellie, of course, choosing to stay behind. She's like, no, I'm still a soldier. I can't be seen with you. The next time we meet with you, though, I am going to be your enemy. So it makes me really look forward to what's actually going to go down the next time we come across Ellie. But back aboard the Yggdrasil, some things happen. We get to see what this choo-choo thing is when we approach Margie, and it's like, is this the prelude to the Nalpon? Because Lord help us all, this thing terrifies me. And we get yet another hidden dialogue with Citan and Sigurd, where Citan now is like, yeah, he's gonna need to know sooner than later, but what's going on with that Mia girl? And I didn't have I just thought maybe she's like a subordinate cast member, but they are seeming to allude that there's more to go along with her, as well as the existence of this group of characters within Solaris, within Gebura, called the Elementals, and I'll need to see a little bit more about that. And unfortunately, that's where we're going to be capping it off for right now. I've barely just entered Nissan. Nishquik wanted me to push through. Apparently there was something that's literally about to happen, but I didn't want to wait anymore with getting this information out, so maybe that's how we're gonna start off the next video as I progress. So that's where things are at. I'm thoroughly loving Xenogears. It is a far more immersive experience than I thought. I am very happy with the perfect work setup. It is letting things progress very smoothly. I'm thoroughly enjoying the game. I'm enjoying the mysteries being built. It's a little too front-loaded on the whole god-slaying talk for how early I feel we are in the game, but I guess I'll just have to see what is coming my way. So please let me know what you think on what I have to say, but again, please do not outright spoil anything in the comments. Am I on the right track? Actually, no, don't even say that. Just let me know your love of Xenogears in the comments, I suppose. All right, everyone. As always, thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.